How do companies create a culture and core values that employees actually live out? The team at The Receptionist, a bootstrapped Denver-based software company, sets out to answer that very question. Welcome to the Fabric Podcast. You're listening to part 1 of 5 of our Employee Supremacy series with Michael Ashford and Andy Alsop.
Well, Andy, if anybody's listened to this podcast over the years, they know we like to talk about Simon Sinek. And so we're going to do a little bit more of that in this episode over the next 5-part series that this episode is a part of. This is part 1, actually. But I just want to get into a little bit of, from Simon Sinek's viewpoint, why does Simon Sinek resonate so much with us and the company here?
There's this Inc.com interview that I'm always talking about. It's only 15 minutes, and it's Simon Sinek talking about the infinite game. And when he talks about things like trusting teams, some of the things we're going to get into, I just kind of felt like this is what we're doing already. This is a definition for what we're already doing and how important employees are to our company. So that's really what created the connection for me. And then when I brought it to the whole leadership team, I think we all agreed. And it wasn't even something where I said, we all need to do this. It was something where we all just connected and said, this just makes a lot of sense.
And you referenced his book, The Infinite Game, which all of us on the leadership team and other members of the company have all read as well. A lot of us did it just on our own because we all like Simon Sinek's work. But as we went through and read The Infinite Game and the parts of what it means to be an infinite game running company versus a finite game, I guess let's start there. Let's take a little bit of Simon Sinek's language here and define what an infinite company is or an infinite-minded company is versus a finite-minded company. How do you see it, or how would you interpret that definition?
Well, and it's, Simon Sinek talks about it all the time, that in an infinite game, or actually let's go back to a finite game, right? He always talks about the fact that let's look at football, baseball. He uses a sports analogy for it, that you have known players, you have known rules. You know that in football, at the end of 60 minutes, whoever has the most number of points wins the game. There's a beginning and end to it. It's very finite. And I think the problem has been that businesses have said we're going to operate in a finite way. We're going to get into that a little bit more. But in an infinite game, infinite game is like what we live in life, right?
Yeah.
He talks about the fact that, you can't be the winner of relationship, right? I'm not going to come to you and say,
"You're not going to have a good relationship if you did."
We all have great relationships with our partners and stuff, but I'm not going to get a Time Magazine award for having the best relationship, right? That isn't an infinite game. It doesn't end. There are no rules to it. So there are so many examples of infinite games, and business is one of them. And so I think the difference between those two is once you get that connection and you realize that, all of a sudden you're starting to say things like, why do we measure ourselves on a 90-day cycle to see how well we've done? That's just saying basically we're trying to play a finite game in an infinite world.
I love the language that he uses, that the point of an infinite game is just to keep the game going.
Right.
I always go out to, when you were kids and you were playing, out in the street with your friends, you just wanted to keep that game going for as long. It didn't matter who won. You weren't trying to obviously you were scoring points, but it was all about, hey, you'd pick that game up the next night with your friends.
Yeah.
And that, not a lot of businesses see the work that we do that way, in that way. We've talked a lot about being a bootstrapped company. And the fact that, you took on initial investment from your brothers, and from there everyone loves when I say we're customer funded.
Right.
I want to ask, does being bootstrapped make it easier in your mind for us to operate in an infinite mindset?
Wow. I mean, that's a great question. I think that it kind of gets to if you take on a lot of venture capital and stuff, you might be saying, okay, can I actually play in the infinite game? And it just comes down to the mindset of the leadership team. It comes down to what you're actually going to do. There's actually great examples. One I always use is the early days of Walmart. In the early days of Walmart, Sam Walton was so focused on the benefits and to benefit his employees, because he always said, if I take care of my employees, I take care that they're going to take care of me and the company. great philosophy. He wasn't worried about it. Another one was Costco, and I know that sounds like both same category, but the leaders of Costco really believe that if you take care of the employees and you actually take care of the company and live in a long cycle and kind of the infinite game where you're really focused on what's going to happen, not in 90 days, but what's going to happen 5 and 10 years down the road, it has such a significant impact. So I kind of feel like it helps that we're bootstrapped, but I wouldn't say that it's completely changed our philosophy, even if and maybe someday we need to bring in capital, right? And we may not be bootstrapped. I am not changing the philosophy. We are not changing the philosophy of this company. We're still going to be living with an infinite mindset.
Absolutely. Now, before we're going to get into what makes up an infinite game based on Simon Sinek's definitions, then we're going to get into one of those, which is our just cause. Mm-hmm. And we're then going to take that a next step further and talk about employee supremacy versus shareholder supremacy, something that you are really championing. That's going to take place throughout the rest of this episode and the other 4 parts of this series for the listeners who are listening to this as episode 1 of this 5-part series. But I would love, before we get into the definitions or the characteristics of an infinite-minded company, what you were just saying resonated so much with me because I just saw on LinkedIn, and I want to get your opinion on this. I just saw a VC post on LinkedIn, something to the effect of, and I'm going to paraphrase, layoffs are part of the VC culture. That if you go into and are hired by a VC-backed company, just expect that 5 years down the road, or, and this was a huge caveat, or if the company's not meeting expectations, layoffs are just going to happen. Deal with it. Just know that's what you're getting into. Now, Andy, for me, the thought running through my mind was, is there no expectation placed on the VC to manage their expectations?
Right.
But I'd love your opinion because I was like, whoa, you are placing a whole lot of blame on the employee right there.
Yeah, it's true. And I don't want to bash VCs, right?
And neither do I.
Or any type of investors, private equity, all of it, right? There's different, you can go from one extreme to the other.
Absolutely.
But I have to say, one of the things, and we're going to talk about the 5 elements, but there's something called trusting teams that are part of the infinite game. How do you have trusting teams when you're living in an environment that if the company doesn't do well, I might lose my job? Now, what you have to remember as an employee, it might seem easy to say, layoffs are layoffs. That's just what you do. But when you lay somebody off, there's a family back there. There are kids behind that person who is making the salary or is being paid. And how is it that person can say, I really trust this company I work with? Because if the leadership team makes a few decisions that are in the benefit of the shareholders, again, I'm a huge shareholder here,
right,
that are in the benefit of the shareholders, those decisions are going to impact me. And I might not be able to make my mortgage. I might not be able to make my car payment. I might not be able to keep my kid in the school that they're in the preschool or whatever. It has tremendous impact. So how is it you build a company where those employees are sitting in front of your customers saying, I love this company, it's great. At some point, I might lose my job just because of the decisions that are being made because it's all about growth. And that's where I have a really big problem with it.
And treating the entirety of employees as a line item.
Correct. An item on the balance sheet.
Yeah.
It's an item that you say, okay, we need to reduce that portion of the balance sheet. And it's seen at a very high level, especially if you have lots of employees. It's just what we do, part of business, just what you saw in that LinkedIn post. And it's not a way to look at it, right? I look at the fact that our employees and all employers and all leadership teams should look at their employees as somebody who is sacrificing part of their lives to work for your company. They are an asset. Yeah. But they're the biggest asset that the company has. That's really, and I guess, when you asked about why was this connection with, the infinite game and stuff, as I'm hearing all these things and you contrast it against that LinkedIn post and I say, what is going on? We can do differently. Does this mean we can't grow? Does this mean we can't be successful? Absolutely not. I don't believe that. In fact, I believe companies can be more successful if they focus on the employees and what their needs are.
You're kind of whetting our appetite for employee supremacy here, Andy, but we're going to hold off. If you want to listen to more and go in depth, you got to listen to the other 4 parts of this series. But let's get into the characteristics, the makeup of an infinite company. We talked about the finite companies. They are, 90-day life cycles of goals and expectations. They're trying to win in business. What are those characteristics as defined by Simon Sinek in The Infinite Game that really, and then we'll piece out, like I said, the just cause part of this, and I'll give that away. You've already said trusting teams. Right. Trusting teams, my goodness, I feel like we here at The Receptionist are kind of the epitome of that. We work and focus so much on trusting teams. But what are the other elements, Andy?
Well, let's start at the top because you put some in these orders, or in this order, I should say. Just cause, and the just cause we're going to get into a little bit. And it's actually, I'm going to say that in the beginning, but get to it at the end because it's a really important one. Mm-hmm. Trusting teams, you talked about it. Trusting teams are all about the employees trust the company, they trust each other, they trust themselves. And I think that is so important that you have that because we've seen some really cool benefits that have come out of that. People doing amazing things because they're not looking over their shoulder saying, when am I going to lose my job? Because the leadership team is getting out in front of its skis in terms of how much money they're spending.
And one other point to that, I mean, it's right back here for the folks watching. It's respectful. I love that the element of respectful is assume positive intent.
Right.
Because that goes right into trusting teams. If you don't trust the person across from you or in that meeting or, the person next to you that you're working to. I mean, I know we're not working next to people nearly as much as we used to physically, but then it's really hard to assume that thing they say or perhaps where they disagree with you, it's really hard to take that as they want what's best for me,
right?
Rather than they're out to get me.
It's so true. Assume positive intent is such an important part. And it goes to the trusting team, right?
Exactly.
You've got to believe that if you're saying things, I'm looking at you and I'm saying, I'm assuming that you're saying this with a positive intent. Yeah. It's a game changer. That, I think, has been a game changer. But if there's not a culture of trust among it, the assume positive intent is almost impossible.
It really is. And we've talked about career trauma here a lot on this podcast. And that's the missing element almost 100% of the time.
And I got to say something about that because there are so many people who come to the company with job trauma. They've been in those other companies that have made decisions as leadership teams that are focused on the shareholders. And then they come here and they kind of hear, hey, you guys seem to be doing something good, but they're like, I don't know if I can trust it. And it's getting over that job trauma. Trauma is something that is hard to get over. It takes a while to trust and become part of a trusting team.
Now, something that's been hard for me to get over is calling our competition rivals rather than the competition, but because it's so business jargony, but worthy rivals is next.
So worthy rivals, I think is, okay, I am the CEO of a company. I've been an entrepreneur for like 25 years. And one of the things is that it's always sort of freaked me out what the competition is doing. I remember when I bought this company in 2015, shortly after, one of our biggest rivals got a huge amount of investment. Mm-hmm. I remember walking out of the office and saying, oh man, our world is over. Well, the thing about worthy rivals as opposed to competitors is worthy rivals are basically a reflection of the things that you need to improve on. So if you look at your rival and you say, wow, that's really good what they're doing, I'm impressed with it. You're kind of changing the perception you have about your competitors, and you're seeing it as, we can do better. This is a place we might want to do better. Not as, oh man, we're going to get crushed by our competition, which is debilitating. It's hard to make a decision in those environments. So huge game changer is calling them, worthy rivals. The other one is existential flexibility. That is the ability to be able to say that I am willing to change. That we're not just going to keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. And we're going to look at it and say, is this the best way to do it? And having that flexibility to kind of get out of your comfort zone and be able to say, we are going to do it differently. And then finally, courage to lead. Courage to lead, I think, comes mostly at the leadership level, the way I interpret it as well. We're doing some things that putting existential flexibility and courage to lead together. We're going to announce it pretty soon what we're doing, but we're taking some courageous steps in terms of what we're doing. We're not just saying, hey, we're successful at what we're doing and just kind of getting stuck in that. We are having the courage to lead. And it happens throughout the company, and it means even somebody who might be an individual contributor, they have the courage to go out there and take the chance.
So then looping back to the top, the just cause. We've been building up to it, but I want to get into what our just cause is, why the just cause is important, and again, the elements of a just cause, and how it's different from a why. Because again, to use Simon Sinek's words or phrases, his books start with why, his TEDx talks start with why. I don't think that's actually what it was called, but it's what everybody remembers it by, right? So many people know him and use that language, but then the just cause, I feel like, gives it that next level of oomph, right? So I'll read off the just cause characteristics, and then I want you to get into what our just cause are. So the just cause characteristics are, it's got to be for something. You've got to actually put your stake in the ground and saying, this is what we are for. It's got to be inclusive. And you can take inclusive in a lot of different directions, but I think it encompasses all of them. It's inclusive of inclusivity, right? Everyone in the company has to have a role and a part to play there. Service-oriented, I love that aspect of it. We do a lot here at The Receptionist to pour into our community and be of service to our community, so that's an aspect. It needs to be resilient, and here's the big part that speaks to our core values of fabric and the B in bold. It's got to be idealistic. It has to be ultimately unachievable, maybe even forever, but progress is better than perfection, to use that phrase. So those are the characteristics of a just cause. So Andy, let's get into our why and our just cause, how they're different. Let's start. Well, first off, do you have any thoughts on those characteristics before we jump into the why and the just cause?
The one that's, I talk about it all the time, ultimately unachievable. We are not going to be able to achieve our just cause in our lifetime. I don't think. I don't know, as you said, if it ever, it's almost like a finite game. We're never going to run to the top of the hill and say, we got this done, right? Because it is actually something, and we'll go into it specifically, but it is something that is ultimately unachievable. And I like that. I like the fact that it is inclusive. It is service-oriented. Inclusive is important because I believe that every member of this team feels it in their bone in terms of what we're trying to do. We're not just trying to be a great visitor management system. We're actually going for something that is really big. And there's something I've got to say, because in terms of the just cause, when I heard the Simon Sinek interview on Inc.com that I've referenced before, I'm like, yeah, we're doing great. We got trusting teams. I understand worthy rivals and existential flexibility, and we have the courage to lead. But I was like, you know what we don't have? We don't have a just cause, which bugged me. I've always been like, I've had people say, well, why are you doing this? We're going to be rich, or we're going to, we're going to be the best visitor management company. They always just sounded empty. And since we adopted a just cause, it has really changed things. And so I just wanted to talk about that. So should I go into our why and our, so one of the things about, and Michael, it's actually you who explained this to me. I remember we're sitting in a leadership team meeting, and I'm trying to describe what the difference is between a why and a just cause. Are you all right?
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, let's share this.
Okay. So what you told me was the why is what pulls us from behind, kind of. It's what actually drives us as people. And so we did this cool thing. 5 of us got together as a leadership team, and we all spent time saying what are our own personal whys. And then we brought that over to the company, and we said, okay, what is our combined why from the company? And it was like, I remember it was like a dead silence in our room when we kind of came up with our why that was connected to all our personal whys. And we're just like, whoa, that just came together. So it's to build a company that operates with compassion, lives with integrity, and fosters strong human connections. I was like, man, that was really good. That's what's pulling us from behind. We want to make sure we have that.
As the sum total of our experiences as people, individuals, as a leadership team, and ultimately as a company.
Right.
Yeah.
And we were lucky that we came together with this group of people who were all aligned, behind that. But I think that also goes to our values and how we operate the company. But then it came up with our just cause. And I want everybody to think to themselves the fact that this is ultimately unachievable, right?
Yeah.
It starts out with to build a world where a company's profits fuel the mission to be in service to its employees and the community. And I always like to repeat that because it really, you almost need to digest it a little bit, but to build a world where a company's profits fuel the mission to be in service to its employees and the community. That's a pretty big deal when you actually look at it. It's not just, hey, let's be a successful company. Let's be the number one visitor management system. This is about actually building a world, a different world. And so that is the thing we brought to the rest of the team.
Yeah. And I will just say there was some at least a little bit of not apprehension, I will say, but just some questioning of like, hey, can we do that?
I know. Yeah. Yeah. A little bit like,
we're
are
a
you
visitor
serious?
management system company. Can we do that? And we, to the idealistic characteristic of the infinite game, maybe not, but we're going to try really hard. And to go back to something you said earlier, Andy, that kind of brings this full circle, being in service to employees and the community. You were just talking really from the onset of when you fire and lay off a bunch of employees, how does that affect not only that individual employee, but their families and the schools that they're in, the communities that they're in? How are they able to show up in their spaces as people and the things that they care about? That is a branch out. When you're thinking that next level deep, you make very different decisions, don't you?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Because if you're really thinking about the consequences of the things you do. So let's say, for instance, one of the things that, we're bootstrapped. That is one place where you really can't get out over in front of your skis. What I mean is like spending beyond what you actually have. We have done very well in acquiring cash through the business and everything. But even through the pandemic, we were able to keep every one of our employees. We were able to increase benefits. Almost every one of our rivals, I'm sad to say, had to lay off employees. Yeah. So that affects the community they're in. They probably had to get rid of a lot of their contractors as well. That's why we talk about the community. The community is not only your contractors and your vendors and the people who rely on your business to give them business, but it's also even who, we even donate to organizations that are in our communities, even in the communities of some of our remote employees, right? We get over our skis and we can't do that. And all of a sudden you have an impact on the community as well.
It breaks down.
So it is so important to include the community as well as the employees in that statement.
Well, Andy, as we begin to put a bow on this episode and discovering our bold just cause, the last thing that I want you to kind of touch on, and then we'll get into it in the other episodes of this series, is our just cause includes the phrase, build a world where a company's profits fuel the mission. We have to be profitable. We have to be successful. This is not hey, let's all stand out in a meadow and sing Kumbaya. And we are still in the business of being in business. So final thoughts on that, how it fits into the just cause and set us up for what is ultimately to come when we talk about employee supremacy.
Well, this is this brings it all home, okay? Because one of the things about this just cause is that a lot of people will look at it and say, it sounds like it's an altruistic kind of thing. It's some sort of socialist movement. You're going to be, great to your employees, and that's so fun, but, have fun over there, right? How are we going to build a world unless we grow, right? Because we have to be the models. I want people to look at our company, and we are going to grow the company using this philosophy, and they say, look at what the receptionist did. And they did it without having to have kind of that icky feeling of like, oh, the employees are just pawns and the community are just pawns in this game of growth and profit. I am the largest shareholder in this company, right? And so as the largest shareholder in the company, I want to see the value of my shares grow. I'm a capitalist. I say it every time. So we have to grow. And so we have to grow so that the value of my shares grow, but we're not going to do it the same way that it's been done all the time. We're going to do it in a different way. And that is how we're going to succeed. So when somebody says to me, what are you out there to do? I can say, I want to see us achieve our just cause as best we can, because then we're going to grow and we're going to show that our shareholder value increases, our customers are happier, our employees are happier, and the company grows overall. That's what I want to see. And that's what we're going to have to do. And I always tell everybody, watch our journey, because if we succeed, you'll see the difference.
And we're going to document it all here on the Fabric Podcast. So thanks so much for listening, Andy. I'm so excited to see where this conversation takes us, because we went to some places I didn't even expect today. So appreciate it. And we'll be back soon. Be on the lookout for the second part of this series, where we really dive into employee supremacy versus shareholder supremacy. So thank you so much. Thanks, Andy. Appreciate it.
Great job, Michael. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Fabric Podcast. If you want to see a video version of the show, jump over to thereceptionist.com/fabric, where you can watch video episodes of all of the content that we've put out on this podcast. You can see our bright smiling faces, and you can see what our studio looks like as well. If you would like to give the Receptionist for iPad Visitor Management System a try in your office, jump over to thereceptionist.com/free trial and sign up for a free trial. No credit card required, and give us a try. See what you think. Until next time, take care.